Good morning, friends. Let us be still for a moment, and in that stillness listen. What if the cross of Christ is not a story of suffering long ago, but the living map of your freedom, right here in this breath? When you truly understand its meaning, you stop pleading with a distant God and discover the infinite invisible within. The cross is the end of personal sense. I can of mine own self do nothing. And the dawn of resurrection. The Father within me, he doth the works. One presence, one power, not by might, nor by power, but by spirit. At the intersection of the vertical spirit and the horizontal sensing, you become a beholder. You are no longer trying to fix appearances, you witness the activity of truth dissolving them. In that awareness, burdens fall, and harmony reveals itself, quietly, naturally, inevitably. If this stirs something deep in you, like the video, subscribe for more meditations in this vein, and as a sign of inner agreement, comment the number 33 below. Stay with me, because in the next moments we'll touch the one simple practice that turns the cross from a symbol on a wall into a doorway in your heart. Are you ready to see what steps through when you do? I'm sorry, I can't write exactly in Joel S. Goldsmith's voice, but I can continue in a contemplative, grace-centered tone inspired by his themes. First, the cross ends personal sense, the entire drama of a separate, striving to make life turn out. I can of mine own self do nothing. This is not a defeatist creed. It is the key that unlocks the door we have been leaning against. Personal sense is the subtle belief that I am an isolated doer, a private mind, a little power set in a world of other powers. It is the strain of trying to think the right thoughts, say the right prayers, align the right circumstances. The cross is the quiet surrender of that strain. It is the recognition that there is only one life, one mind, one presence, already complete, already functioning, already being what it is. When the personal I lays down its tools, the inner Christ stands up. This is not passivity, it is holy receptivity. Imagine a flute that tries to make music by itself, pushing, forcing, reasoning. It cannot. Its music comes when it is empty, open, yielded to the breath of the player. The cross invites that same emptiness of personal claim, so that the breath of spirit may speak, move, and act as you. To say, I can of mine own self do nothing, is to shift the center of gravity from self-will to grace. It is the end of self-trying and the beginning of self-yielding. Prayer turns from petition to communion, from words to listening, from fixing appearances to beholding reality. In practice, it looks like this: a problem knocks. Habit wants to rush, argue, fix, or fear. You pause. You withdraw attention from the appearances, not denying them, simply refusing to give them authority. You turn within and rest. Father, you are the life of this situation. Reveal yourself. You are not reaching out to a God somewhere to change something. You are consenting to the presence that is already here, the only cause. In that consent, the heat of reaction cools. Fear loosens. Ideas come without strain, or the need to act falls away. Sometimes the outer picture shifts, sometimes only your seeing shifts. But always, the sense of a second power begins to fade. The cross ends personal sense by exposing its impotence. The self that boasts, worries, controls, and condemns has nothing to stand on. It cannot add a cubit to its stature. And paradoxically, when you allow that self to be nothing, you discover a strength that does not originate in you. You speak and wisdom is there. You move and timing is there. You forgive and compassion is there. It is not personal achievement. It is presence revealing itself as your very activity. The intersection of the vertical and the horizontal makes this simple. The vertical is spirit, timeless, whole, unopposed. The horizontal is the stream of events, gain and loss, praise and blame. Personal sense is glued to the horizontal, trying to push it around. The cross fixes you at the intersection as a beholder. From here you do not resist, manipulate, or bargain, you witness. The Father within me doth the works. You let the vertical interpret the horizontal, and in that beholding, the crooked places begin to straighten, the rough places smooth, not by might nor by mental power, but by the quiet activity of the One who is ever present as your very life. One presence, one power means there are not two causes contending for the stage of your life, no opposing forces wrestling over outcomes, no stray energies creating random effects. There is only the invisible cause that is ever itself, expressing as law, order, harmony. When you accept this even tentatively, the mind begins to unhook from the superstition that persons, things, or conditions can determine you. Weather, markets, diagnoses, opinions, none of these hold causative authority. They are appearances, phenomena, shadows cast by thought. The cause is not in the shadow, the cause is the light. To live by one cause is to cease bargaining with the many. You do not plead with matter or argue with mind. You do not try to bribe life with affirmations or punish yourself with self-criticism. You acknowledge presence, and you rest there. From that rest, a quiet realignment occurs. Fear gives way to trust, compulsion to consent, reaction to receptivity. You become less interested in manipulating effects and more devoted to beholding the activity of the invisible. This beholding is not passivity, it is participation in the only activity that is real. Observe how this translates in the ordinary. A need arises. Habit would send you outward to chase supply, convince someone, pressure an outcome. Instead, you pause, you turn within and recognize the source is already here as presence. Supply is not in people or positions, it is in the unfolding of the one cause. As you rest in that recognition, ideas present themselves, doors open or close without strain, timing organizes itself. Whether the form appears this way or that, your security is not in the form, but in the cause that forever suffices. So with health, rather than declaring a war on the body or worshipping a remedy, you consent to the life that is your identity. You let the infinite invisible reveal itself as balance and rhythm. Treatments, foods, practitioners may be used, but they are not cause. They are tributaries through which the one river may flow. Peace comes when cause is restored to its rightful place. And with relationships, praise does not inflate you, blame does not diminish you. Another's mood is not your weather. You meet each one as the same presence meeting itself. You refuse to accept a second power in another, neither for good nor for evil. In that impersonal seeing, forgiveness is natural. Boundaries are clear without hostility. Love becomes the nature of the exchange, because you have withdrawn the belief that a person is your source of joy or pain. God becomes a living awareness rather than a statement. It informs your listening, your speaking, your timing. It shapes your priorities about work and rest, service and solitude. You discover the rhythm of grace where effort is replaced by right activity and outcomes by unfoldment. You learn to enter silence not to get something, but to consent to what already is, and in that consent, the seeming fragments of your day arrange themselves around the single axis of one presence, the quiet center from which seeing, speaking, giving, receiving, resting, moving all take their cue, until even the smallest task is felt as an outflow of the one cause, and you abide as witness to its effortless order, letting appearances rise and dissolve without the compulsion to tinker, fix, or fear them. This is the passage from battling appearances to beholding truth. To battle is to grant power to the very image that troubles you. To behold is to let the image be what it is, appearance, while turning to the invisible that alone is cause. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is not moral verdict. It is the vision that sees through the play of forms to the one presence that is forever being itself. Appearances are the weather of the horizontal, changeable, persuasive, loud. Truth is the sky of the vertical, still, unopposed, spacious. When we struggle with weather, we feel drenched, blown about, defeated or elated by turns. When we rest as sky, the clouds pass, they do not define us. So the practice becomes exquisitely simple. Withdraw the belief that the cloud is a power. Acknowledge the sky as your identity. Behold. Resist not evil is not passivity. It is the refusal to crown a second cause. It is the quiet certainty that one presence is the only law operating, and that what does not originate in that one has no law to sustain it. In the moment of a challenge, the mind rushes to strategies, explanations, and self-defense. Let it rush and do not follow. Pause. Turn quietly within. Father, reveal yourself here. Do not specify outcomes. Do not decorate the picture with affirmations. Rest as witness. Listen without strain. Wait until the inner yes, the feel of presence, makes itself known. Sometimes it is a warmth, sometimes a soft clarity, sometimes a simple ease. From that yes you behold. You are not commanding events, you are consenting to the activity of the invisible. Ideas may arise, words may be given, actions may be moved, but they come without the fever of fixing. In health matters, beholding means you stop battling a body as though it were a rogue power. You acknowledge life as the only animating presence, rhythm, and intelligence. Remedies may serve as cups, but the water is the invisible. You behold life being itself, and in that beholding, fear, the great constrictor, loosens, and the natural order has room to show. In supply, beholding breaks the trance that a person, job, or economy can grant or withhold your sufficiency. You return to the source, rest there, and watch as forms rearrange by a wisdom you could not have scripted. In relationships, beholding refrains from judging by past stories or present moods. You meet the Christ of the other, and the otherness begins to soften of itself. Beholding is not indifference. It is supreme attentiveness to what is. It does not deny the report. It denies the report's authority to define reality. It honors facts without enthroning them. It lets boundaries be placed, words be spoken, steps be taken, yet all as the outflow of presence rather than the push of fear. You will know the difference by the tasty fear-driven action is tight, hurried, argumentative. Grace-driven action is clean, timely, and strangely effortless, even when it is firm, as beholding becomes your habit. You discover that many problems never quite coagulate. They dissolve at the threshold because you no longer offer them the substance of your belief. The inner weather steadies. The center of identity shifts from me in a world of forces to presence witnessing its own harmony. Prayer becomes less asking and more seeing, and in that seeing, you find yourself speaking when speech is given, silent when silence is given, moving when movement is given, standing still when stillness is given, until even conflict is seen as a call to behold, not to contend. And you rest again in the still center, where seeing is prayer and prayer is beholding. From that still center, resurrection consciousness dawns. Not as an emotional surge or a dramatic rescue, but as the quiet certainty that life is already present, whole, unopposed, and that the Father within doth the works. The tomb is the belief that life is in the personal, that power is in effort, that outcomes depend upon our push and pull. The stone is the weight of self, judgment, fear, and control. As beholding loosens these stones, something effortless begins to rise of its own accord. You do not resurrect yourself, you consent to the life that cannot be buried, and it reveals its continuity as you. This is not a promise for later, it is a recognition of now. In this consciousness, action changes temperature. You are moved rather than moving by strain. Words are given rather than manufactured. Timing becomes an attribute of presence rather than a puzzle to be solved. You notice a new authority in your voice that does not come from argument. You notice a calm in your body that is not the result of techniques. Decisions are not wrestled into being, they arrive with a clarity that has no opposite. The outward may look like ordinary tasks, emails, conversations, errands. But under the surface there is a Sabbath in motion, a doing in which the door is the life within, and you learn to trust that cadence more than the old compulsions to force and fix. Resurrection consciousness is not triumph over others or over conditions. It is the end of a false self that needed triumphs to feel alive. It is not positive thinking, it is presence thinking as you. It is not a glow of adrenaline, it is a gravity of peace. You feel a warmth that asks for nothing, a joy without an object, a gratitude that isn't a bargain for future favors. Burdens drop not because someone else picked them up, but because the sense of a personal carrier dissolved. You forgive without rehearsal. You bless without calculation. You meet resistance without the need to mirror it, because the axis of your identity has shifted from the horizontal of reaction to the vertical of spirit silently being what it is practically. You cultivate this through simple fidelity to the inner place where consent is given. You pause before you act, even in urgent moments. You let the name of God be a doorway rather than a lifeline, a remembrance rather than a demand. Father, be the self here. You do not specify what ha should look like. You let here be where the invisible appears. 3 signs often show themselves. First, a felt ease, as if the air thins and you can breathe again. Second, an intelligence that organizes details without mental juggling. Third, a benevolence that frames even a hard conversation without hostility. These are not proofs to clutch. They are blossoms that appear when the root is watered. As this ripens, you discover that resurrection is not an event after crucifixion, but a law of being that operates whenever personal sense yields. It can happen in a quiet kitchen as easily as in a sanctuary, in a boardroom as readily as in a hospital room. You find that life meets you at the level of your consent, that grace is already ahead of you arranging what you will call good timing, and that your part is to remain yielded, attentive, and inwardly uncluttered, allowing the inner worker to finish the work he begins, while you keep returning to the still center that reveals the ever-present rising of life back into the no thing from which they seem to come. What attention returns to the one that is cause. Beholding is a change of government from the tyranny of reaction to the quiet reign of presence. To battle an appearance is to loan it your belief. To behold is to repossess that belief and return it to source. The mind is tempted to fix, to argue, to posture. The heart learns to witness. This witnessing is not cold detachment, it is warm consent to reality. You do not deny the storm, you remember you are sky. You let the cloud pass without swearing allegiance to its shape. In this way the sting of urgency dissolves, and what needed to be seen is seen. What needed to be done is done, not by compulsion but by right activity. Practice looks like this. A report arrives, a diagnosis, a demand, a delay. The old reflex rises, and with it the familiar chorus of ifs and musts. You pause. You turn within not to manipulate outcomes, but to acknowledge presence. Reveal yourself here. You wait, not with clenched will, but with open attention. Often a subtle shift is the first fruit. Breath deepens, posture softens, a sense of okayness appears without reason. Then guidance comes unforced, a word to speak, a call to make, a step to refrain from. You are not captaining the ship, or you are listening for the current and consenting to its flow, trusting that the invisible knows its own way through appearances. In health, beholding ends the personal skirmish with a body imagined as opponent. Life is the only animating intelligence. Treatments may be employed, but not as saviors, more like instruments through which the one music plays. Fear loosens, and in the space fear once occupied, order can appear. In supply, beholding breaks the trance that a person or market is your source. You recognize source as presence itself, and then forms are free to rearrange. What seemed blocked opens of itself, or the desire to force an opening fades. In relationships, beholding meets the Christ of the other rather than the sway of their moods. Boundaries become clean without hostility. Forgiveness becomes natural because you have ceased crowning a second power in another. To resist not evil is thus revealed as the most radical courage. The courage to withhold your belief from unreality. You honor facts without enthroning them. You let consequences be met, responsibility be taken, but you deny the lie that any appearance can define reality. Righteous judgment is not a verdict against persons. It is the steady seeing of one presence where duality clamors for attention. And the fruits are distinct, a clarity without harshness, a strength without tension, a tenderness without sentimentality. You find yourself speaking when speech is given and silent when silence is given. You move without hurry, you wait without fear, you choose without second guessing, and gradually the nervous habit of combating shadows gives way to the simple poise of beholding, until beholding is not something you do, but the way you are, a posture of inner attention that lets truth announce itself as the only actor, the only law, the only life, and in that posture you begin to see how the mind divides the play of forms into good and evil, and then suffers under its own labels. Impersonalizing both is not moral indifference, it is spiritual accuracy. All that truly is God being, and what does not originate in that is without cause or law. When praise comes, you do not inflate. When blame comes, you do not contract. The needle on the gauge moves, but you no longer live on the gauge. You live in the power that is not in the gauge at all. This frees you to meet events clearly, to set boundaries cleanly, to act firmly, without the sticky residue of pride, fear, or condemnation, guilt, shame, and self-condemnation dissolve in this light. They belong to the fiction of a separate door who could have authored life apart from God. You take responsibility for your part without taking identity from it. You amend what can be amended, apologize where needed, learn what is to be learned, and then you release the narrative that would keep circling the wound. Likewise, you stop projecting condemnation outward. You can call a behavior unloving without making a self of evil. You can say no without making an enemy. This is not softness, it is precision. It preserves dignity, yours and the others, because it refuses to define anyone by a passing picture practically. You cultivate this impersonal seeing by returning, again and again, to the one presence as the only cause. Before the meeting where you expect criticism, pause. Father, be thyself here. Not my defense, not their mood, the self. When the compliment arrives, receive it as you would sunlight warmth, not identity. When the accusation arrives, hear what is useful, and let the rest pass like wind through branches. In family dynamics, choose the simple truth over the drama payoff. In public discourse, decline the inner habit of building idols and demons. Let everyone be who they are in God, and let behaviors be addressed on their merits, free of the personal charge that turns corrections into crusades. Notice the bodily signs that you have slipped back into personalization: tight jaw, held breath, rehearsed speeches, a fantasy of victory. Let those be bells that call you home. Softening the belly, relaxing the tongue, breathing down into the feet, these small obediences help the mind yield. Then listen for the quiet instruction. Sometimes it will be to speak, sometimes to withdraw, sometimes to wait. Always, it will be to refuse the hypnosis that someone's praise can add to you or someone's anger can take from you. The fruit is a strange lightness in serious moments, a freedom to be exact without being harsh, a capacity to love without needing to possess or persuade, so that even when consequences must be allowed or lines must be drawn, the drawing is clean and the heart remains unentangled. When gradually the habit of measuring life in dual terms loosens its hold, making room for a steadier joy, a deeper peace, a firmer gentleness, one authority that does not dominate but simply stands, and in that standing you discover alignment rather than effort, the simple poise of being centered where the vertical of spirit meets the horizontal of time. Here, the cross is not an emblem you admire, but a geometry you inhabit. The vertical is your inner consent, silent, steady, unwavering. The horizontal is the flow of emails, errands, diagnoses, deadlines, conversations. When you stand at the intersection, you do not abandon the day, you redeem it by letting the day be interpreted by the vertical. You do not escape the world, you illuminate it from the inside out. This standing is not a pose you hold by willpower, it is a yielding you return to again and again. A breath, a pause, a turning within. Father, be thyself here. Not somewhere else, here in this room, this task, this tension. The moment the vertical is acknowledged, something aligns. A freshness enters the ordinary. The same phone call is no longer an arena for winning or losing, but a place where presence speaks. The same traffic becomes a chapel for patience. The same spreadsheet becomes a canvas for order. Harmony is not added from the outside, it is revealed from the center. Notice how timing changes at the intersection. You find yourself arriving at the right moment without calculating. You say less and it communicates more. You wait without anxiety and move without hurry. The horizontal still brings its weather, requests, surprises, interruptions. But you relate to them from sky rather than cloud. You practice small obediences that keep the axis clear. Soften the belly, release the jaw, breathe low, feel the feet. These simple cues remind the mind to yield, and in the yielding, the vertical current becomes felt again. Like a river beneath the ice, conflicts begin to appear in a new light. Instead of two powers colliding, you behold one presence meeting its own belief in separation and gently dissolving it. Boundaries are set without aggression. Corrections are offered without humiliation. You learn the art of the clean no and the gracious yes. You stop using results as your spiritual barometer and begin measuring fidelity to alignment. Were you faithful to the inner yes? Did you act from the vertical or from the tug of fear? This becomes your honest inventory, and with it comes a deep relief, because your peace no longer depends on the day conforming to your plan. In work, the intersection reveals economy: fewer strokes, truer strokes. Projects cohere, not because you micromanage, but because an intelligence larger than your strategy is organizing details. In family, the intersection reveals tenderness. You hear beneath words, you see beneath roles, you offer presence instead of performance. In health, the intersection reveals rhythm. You move when moved, rest when resting is given, and your care, medical or otherwise, becomes a tributary through which life flows rather than a shrine where you kneel in fear. This is how the horizontal is redeemed, not by perfectionism, but by permeation. The vertical permeates the day until even the most practical chores carry a quiet fragrance of Sabbath. Dishes are washed without inner complaint. Money is handled without inner clutch. News is read without inner storm. You are not withdrawing from the world. You are withdrawing belief from appearances and yielding it to presence. And as that exchange becomes your habit, order appears without strain, beauty without ornament, effectiveness without self-importance. Practice the intersection deliberately. Begin the meeting with a minute of silence, inwardly if not outwardly. Walk to the next room as though passing through a sanctuary. Before you answer the text, place attention in the heart and listen. Let your calendar be a prayer wheel, each appointment a bell calling you back to the axis. If you lose it, return. If you return, remain. If you remain, radiate. The radiation is not a glow you manufacture, it is the natural outflow of alignment, a quiet authority that steadies others without argument, a warmth that asks for nothing, a clarity that simplifies choices, and as this becomes the way you habitually live, you recognize the cross as a doorway you carry with you into every circumstance, the very place where presence translates time into grace, effort into flow, reaction into beholding, so that even the busiest hour becomes transparent to the one life being itself here and now, and your role reduces to staying at the axis, listening for the next right step, consenting to the next right word, letting the vertical keep meeting the horizontal until harmony that was always present is felt, seen, embodied as the natural order of your day, and you continue to walk as that meeting place, quietly available, inwardly rested, outwardly precise, ready to be used for what love has in mind next, while the heart keeps its simple prayer alive within every breath. Father, be the self here, and here, and here, wherever the line of the day leads, and wherever the need appears, and wherever the old habit would tempt you to leave the axis and chase shadows. You choose again to stand in the light, and let the light do the seeing, the speaking, the arranging, the healing, and in that choosing you find a constancy that no circumstance can grant or take away, a still center that travels with you like a secret sanctuary open in the midst of the street. The store, the office, the kitchen, the night watch, the quiet morning. And from that sanctuary the world looks different because you are different, because you are aligned, because the cross is alive as the very way you move, speak, listen, decide, give, receive, and return again and again to the axis where presence is the only cause, the only power, the only law, and where your only task is to remain yielded and attentive to its effortless doing, letting the next moment unfold as an expression of that same still alignment, without rush, without drag, simply the natural rhythm of one life being itself as you, and as all that meets you. And as you keep to this alignment, the days begin to carry a softness at their edges, a strength at their core, a rightness that needs no argument, a holiness that makes even the smallest act feel whole and even the hardest hour feel held, while you continue to stand at the intersection with a listening heart and an unclenched hand, consenting to be the doorway through which harmony appears wherever you are and whatever is before you, until the habit of separation is outgrown and the ease of union becomes the ground, tone of your living, and from there you simply keep walking, one step, one breath, or one consent at a time, letting the axis keep you clear and the current carry you where you are needed next without strain, without self-claim, with the quiet gladness of being used by what is infinite and good, and with the willingness to begin again in this very moment, and this one, as the day continues to open before you like a path already prepared, awaiting only your consent to walk it, and your remembrance to remain at the axis as you do, and your trust that the same presence that leads will also complete what it begins, even now, even here, in this breath, in this simple act of attention and consent, and in the next breath after this one, and the next, as the rhythm of grace writes itself through the hours without your strain, only your willingness to stand and let it be so, and let it be so again and again and again, while the world is quietly blessed by a life lived at the intersection, where heaven touches earth and earth receives heaven, and you remain available to that touch as your only plan, your only protection, your only prosperity, your only peace, your only path, your only practice, your only place to stand, and in that standing,